Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, since the dawn of human existence, artistic masterpieces across the eras and across the hundreds of years and thousands of years we've been alive, as early as Egyptian pottery, works of Michelangelo, and all the way to entire cultural heritage sites, were made for a purpose. Why do we have art, and what is art for? This was largely created by those masters and artisans who created it for a very specific person in a very specific context in which they were alive. That is to say that it's quite specific, the reason and motivation they made it for, and I think geographic proximity, especially when it's with a certain group of people under a certain set of borders, is quite important. A few features of our model to make this debate quite clear, and note that some of these things also serve as positive material. Number one, this is a value judgment debate about priority, meaning on both sides, maintenance in the name of material integrity is important, and cultural preservation in the name of contextual permanence will also be important. But where this debate happens are in those specific black and white areas in which we have to choose one or the other. So for instance, if for very practical reasons, there might be a call to action to have to move a particular painting or a particular sculpture all the way to Europe or America in order to preserve it, or on our side, doing our best to keep it and maintain it in that particular area is something that we rather have, as to not undermine the artistic identity and reason why this was created. Number two, what does contextual permanence look like on our side of the house? A, local towns, communities, and the families of the artist, if they're still alive, doing their best to organically maintain and have upkeep for these particular arts, sculptures, and important pieces. They can get funding through the local community and government, of which they have certain local museums. And I think it's fair to say that especially the estate and family of that artist has every incentive to be able to make sure that these things are done well. B, a legal and principled push on defending the rights of ownership and intellectual property of that aforementioned community and family of that artist. The push here is that these groups of people in that very specific locale and jurisdiction have a legal claim over those particular things. And what we want to avoid is going into pillaging and resource war. Like what we see with the Americas and the British Museum, literally plundering and pillaging a lot of art from Latin America, a lot of art from some places in Africa in the name of protecting it. C, this also looks like pushing the state to create better incentive structures, like infrastructure, which is more resilient to floods, like flood barriers, mangrove plantations, etc., and even upscaled technological developments to make certain buildings and museums withstand earthquakes, all while not moving those very important pieces of art. And D, something we have to note, because in many cases, this art has a very important purpose. I'll take you in a bit. It has a motivation and reason. So for instance, you might have in certain places of Asia or even in Africa, art which depicts against police brutality and violence. But it's quite suspicious if you move these places to predominantly EPL or white-centered places somewhere in Britain or in the United States, which is rather ironic. We're here to defend the original message of that particular artist. Before I move on, go ahead. I'll take your point. 3, 2, 1. Go, hurry up. Yeah. Sure. Yo, it's not audible. I'm sorry. You can type it in the chat. Hopefully I can get an extension on that. If not, it's fine. What is my case? A principled push on how these communities have a claim over this land, and ultimately by extension, the jurisdiction that they have over that land is quite particularly related to the art of those particular artists who made it for the community. I am also going to be able to explain how even if in the worst case it gets damaged or destroyed in its entirety, that is a value we're willing to defend. Number one, we need to talk about the subjective norms of culture, religion, and identity, which are rooted to this art. That is to say, a lot of art within the Catholic Church is in the Vatican. A lot of art and murals by the Jews is by the Wailing Wall in Israel. A lot of art important to Muslims is located in Mecca. Meaning, the creation of cultural heritage sites, very specific, that allow these particular people to exercise their faith and religion, becomes a journey in itself to be able to go to that place in order to give tribute not just to your religion, but using that art and what the artist intended for that particular purpose. Number two, in instances where the artist is dead, their family, their estate, or their community has a significant claim over these things. That is to say, when you move it either by force or either through coercion, in and of itself is a form of plunder, ladies and gentlemen, and the assertion of the harm of cultural appropriation when these white or European folk try to say, we can take it better, it should be ours, we're gonna lock it away in the confines of a building they call a museum. This undermines the emotional attachment of these particular people who are now no longer literally proximate to this particular art. The previous speaker talks about how you cannot separate the meaning from the actual thing, and I call BS for the reason that despite a lot of things in our world not being there, a lot of the ancient sculptures and different kinds of things, those places and communities are able to transcend the meaning of that art when they're able to create cultural enclaves for purpose when you go there, when you visit them, when you literally see it. Ladies and gentlemen, if we want to be able to preserve the visceral experience of art, religion, culture, and identity, you cannot necessarily just assume it's one thing. We're here to be able to say art is better left untouched and unmoved. We are very proud to clash on side opposition.